So let's talk a little bit about headlight restoration. As you can see here, we've got a headlight that is oxidized and yellowed out. So let's talk about just a little bit the structure of a headlight itself. All the modern headlights nowadays are made of polycarbonate, and when the polycarbonate headlights are manufactured, there is a UV cured hard coat that is kind of sprayed on or wiped on over these headlights and then UV cured to bond to that surface. However, what happens is that over time, or whether it be a period of months or even years, that coating that protects the polycarbonate just gradually starts to oxidize. And as you probably noticed, that oxidation generally starts the further north, or with the top of the headlight, being that that's where the most sun exposure occurs. So like on this headlight here, as we can see, the top is all yellowed out, the front side to a certain degree, and then the sides are relatively clear still, being that the original coating has held on pretty good on this lower portion. So some people might ask, how can I go about doing headlight restoration mobile? Well, you certainly can. Obviously you would need a power source in order to do this, so you could run it off of a generator, or if you're working on a car lot or somebody's house, just finding a power source to plug your curing light into, to plug your random orbital sander into in order to start the headlight restoration process. But those are really the two things that you need in order to do this mobile: to find basically a power source and to find a little bit of shade in which to operate to apply the coating properly. As far as being able to apply the coating once we've got the restoration done, it is important to try to get the headlight out of direct sunlight if at all possible. That will allow the flash off to occur with the coating. It will also allow you to get the coating to apply more readily without any streaks on the surface or without visible streaks. So if at all possible, try to get the vehicle into the shade, whether it be under a tree or in the shade of a building, or whatever it might be, in order to get it out of the direct sunlight. Ideally, of course, if you can do it in a shop setting, that's always better. You're going to have a more controlled environment in which to apply the coating, but those steps should help you to get a good application no matter whether you're working outside or inside. Some people ask, well, what is the benefit of having the Gclear UV curing lamp? Well, certainly being able to cure in a controlled environment helps to prevent dust and other debris from sticking to the coating during or before the curing process. So especially if you're working in a shop setting, it's great to have that curing light. Allows you to cure at really any time of day, any climate. If it's cloudy outside, you're going to get a consistent cure, and you can also get the vehicle in a setting that would allow you to avoid as much debris or dust collection on the headlight during the coating process. As regards to what sort of warranty you can offer with the Gclear headlight restoration system, our internal weatherometer testing and our independent weatherometer testing has shown that the coating will last between 3 to 5 years in most climates. So set your warranty based on your climate. If you're in a climate that's sunny and you're at a high altitude all year round, you might want to err on the safe side, on this closer to the 3 years. If you're in a climate that's cloudy and tends to be relatively dreary, there's not a whole lot of UV present, well, you might want to go a little bit further. Also factor in that most people's vehicles, the average person keeps their vehicle no more than 3 years, so that's also something to factor in when making a decision as to how to set your warranty. But the OEM hard coating, the hard coat, the Gclear hard coat, should last somewhere in a similar range to that of the original hard coat. Many people ask, what would be a good customer base for doing headlight restoration? Well, no doubt there are a variety of areas where headlight restoration can be done. Used car dealerships being one of them, car washes being another, auto body shops could be another, detailing shops, any shop or business that works on cars on a regular basis. Window tinting shops, stereo shops have opportunities to see vehicles like this with a yellowed out headlight, and headlight restoration is an easy add-on to add to upgrade the customer and offer them a practical solution and a long-lasting solution to this common problem. As far as what the benefits of adding headlight restoration to your company would be, well, there are many, right? Obviously, the service is quite profitable. The cost per consumable for a set of headlights is maybe in the $2 to $4 range as far as consumable costs, on the high end $4. And typically, with a OEM grade product like ours, you can offer, or you can sell the service for somewhere in the neighborhood of $75 to $125 per set, maybe even higher depending on your market. So there's great margins there. No inventory required, just the coating and sanding discs are really your only consumables involved, and it's certainly something that has that wow factor for your customers. Once they see this headlight fully restored, they're going to be like, wow, and as soon as they drive their car at night, they're going to really be impressed. So it creates a great impression with your customers, and it's an easy upsell. Some people ask, what is the shelf life of your Gclear coating? Generally speaking, you can expect it to last about a year of shelf life. Beyond that, we recommend that you throw it out and start over. But it's also important to remember to shake the bottle before each application to make sure that the chemical components is thoroughly mixed up. It's also important to shake the bottle for a couple of reasons in order to get the chemical product fully mixed up so that you get a proper cure, you get proper adhesion without streaking. So each time you go to apply, make sure you shake the bottle thoroughly for a good 15 to 30 seconds before starting the application. People often ask, how many times can I use one of the Glas Weld applicators to do how many sets of headlights? Well, typically you can use one side for a set. So you may be able to use one side for one set and the other side for another set. So you might say 2 vehicles per applicator in most cases. Now you can put these in a plastic bag, ziplocked, airtight, or even in a black bag, but over time, if you use them excessively, you will start to get streaking just because the applicator tends to start to kind of harden up or create uneven surfaces, which will lead to streaking when you go to apply it. If you're working in a lot of ambient light or in direct sunlight, you may notice that as you begin to wipe on the coating, that it may start to cure relatively quickly. So it's important always to do what you can to get the vehicle out of the ambient light and out of the direct sunlight in particular in order to do so. But it is also important to understand that the coating application should go pretty quickly. So that's the part that takes the most practice, is understanding how to apply in an efficient manner so you get the best result possible. We'll go through that in the training video. Now, if you notice kind of a white cloudy appearance when you go to apply the coating, that's typically due to the presence of moisture. So there are a couple of things you can do to prevent that from occurring. If it's a real humid day, it's raining outside, maybe you're working in a shop setting, or you're just in a very humid climate, it's a good idea to have a heat gun on hand, and you can use that heat gun to heat the entire lens prior to applying the coating. By doing so, you're evaporating any of the moisture that might be sitting on the surface, so that when you go to coat the lens, in most cases that will resolve that issue. Some people ask about using aerosol applications and how that compares to a wipe-on application. You know, with aerosols, there are a couple of downsides to them. One of which is that you have to mask off a larger area. So in our training, you'll notice that we only mask off directly around the headlight, which creates less work both on the front side and on the back side after the repair is complete. The other thing is that with the aerosols, you're breathing in a lot more particulates. And it also tends to use more product, be less cost effective, and in some cases can create drips as well. So the wipe-on application has several benefits. It doesn't get as much of the product into the air, you don't have to mask off the vehicle as much, and it is less susceptible to drips and streaking. Alright, so we're going to start our Gclear OEM grade headlight restoration process now. So as you can see, this lens is yellowed out on the top, the front side is relatively clear still. First thing we need to do is obviously clean the surface. So we're just going to take a little bit of water and a rag, just kind of wipe it off. Make sure we've got a reasonable surface to adhere to around the trim as well. So just clean off that loose debris. We'll put our rag to the side and water to the side. Now we want to mask off the area, so we're just going to put a quick line of tape around these edges. Start up here at the top. Work our way around the sides. Kind of slide the tape into the cracks around the lens so that we can get the coating all the way to the edges. Important to do this because we will be using a random orbital sander, and the sanding process can, of course, kind of abrade away the paint surface, so we don't want that to happen. So we're just going to do this as a preventative measure. Okay, great. So just make sure our tape is well adhered all the way around. And now we can begin the sanding process. So one of the common misconceptions about headlight restoration is that you might assume that if the headlight looks relatively clear, I have to use less abrasive. Well, it's actually the opposite is true. Because this yellowed out coating is just barely hanging on, that part will be removed readily with a 600 grit, for instance. So if this entire headlight were yellow, I'd probably start with a mild abrasive, like a 600 for instance. Being that this headlight is clear on the bottom and yellow on the top. I need a more aggressive abrasive to start in order to get this original coating off so we can get a uniform application. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to choose my abrasive. In this case, I'll probably start with a 320 or a 240, and within the first few seconds we'll know whether we're able to remove that old still clear coating like we have right along the sides here to get a proper finish across the surface. So we've got our Gclear random orbital tool here, very high quality tool, has a nice tight cutting action here. We've also want to make sure that we have our interface pad applied. Now that interface pad will allow us to get a nice finish across the surface without the disc digging into the glass. So I've chosen a 240 grit in this case because of the fact that I have this yellow or this fully cleared material over here. 320 could work as well, but we're going to start with a 240 in this case. One thing to be aware of is some people like to do the first step dry, which can be more effective as far as speed goes. If you decide to do the first step dry, it's very important to make sure you have a mask on. Obviously you don't want to be breathing in any particulates, and it's also good to understand that by using your disc dry you won't get as much life out of the discs. But if you're all about getting things done quickly, the first step could be done dry, especially when we've got an uneven oxidized surface like this. So I'm going to use a little bit of water. I'm just going to start this thing up. So we always want to start it on the headlight. If the disc is wet and I start it up here, it's going to make a mess. So by starting it on the headlight, we'll get a better finish. Okay, so let's stop for a second. As you can notice here, this headlight has a lot of kind of yellow junk that's coming off of it. So that is the old oxidized coating that is being removed very swiftly by this sanding disc. You also notice that I use water just intermittently, kind of as needed. Again, you can do that dry. And again, you've got options on that first step. It could be a 240, it could be a 320, or it could be a 600. You really have to determine how oxidized the lens is. Again, if it's fully oxidized, start with a less aggressive abrasive. If it's not fully oxidized, for instance, if there's just this yellow portion right on the top, you need a more aggressive abrasive in order to get a uniform finish. So we're just going to wipe this off now and kind of see whether we've got that uniform finish, and then we'll determine as to whether we need to keep going or not. Okay, so it looks pretty good, right? We've got a pretty nice uniform look here. We're just going to kind of check it and see if there's any areas that need attention. In between, I can kind of rinse this disc off just by spraying some water on it. Now I can continue to use it. And we're just looking for any areas that may continue to have coating or that need to be kind of smoothed out. Keep in mind that your first step, your first sanding step, is the most important. It's also the most time consuming, where you'll spend a couple of minutes because you want to get it fully uniform. After that, it's just polishing steps, so those are going to go more quickly. I'm looking at this now, and there's just a few spots right up here at the top that I want to hit for another minute, and then right along here on the front. Other than that, it should be good to go. So I'm going to spend about another 30 seconds on this. Okay, very good. So now we should be finished with our first step, which is removing all of that coating, giving us a nice cloudy uniform finish. So one thing to keep in mind, you also notice during this step I had the tool on about a 3. 3 to 4 would probably be the high end because we are removing the surface. Now once we go to the secondary steps, we'll increase the speed up to a 4, 5, or 6 in order to get a little more of a polishing action. When you go to change your sanding disc, it's important to remember to kind of pin the interface pad between your finger and your thumb, or your finger and your nail, and kind of pull the disc off while pinning the interface pad. If you don't do that, the interface pads can tend to separate relatively quickly. So just like so. So now I'm going to swap that out, and I'm going to put a 400 grit on. Again, depending on which step you start with, you'll progress accordingly. So if we was going to start with a 600, I'd progress to maybe a 1200. In this case, I started with a 240, so I'm going to move to a 400. Now on these secondary steps, you would always want to do it with water. You get more of a polish up effect if you use the water. And again, we're going to increase the speed up a little bit as well, up to maybe a 4, 5, or 6. Okay, stop, wipe it off. So we've got a nice uniform finish, and now we're gonna move on to the next disc. So as you can see in those secondary steps, we're not spending very long, maybe 30 seconds to a minute at the most. So now that we've gotten the first 2 steps done, I'm gonna move up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 grit. Apply a little bit of water. And as we go up, we're gonna use more water, again, to get kind of more of a polishing effect. So as we can see, each step we go, it's getting a little bit more clear. And now we're going to move to the final step. Again, removing the disc, and we're going to swap that out for a 2,000 grit. This will be our last step. Now, if you're in a high volume situation, you definitely can coat directly from a 1200. Right here, if we go with the coating, we'll get a very good finish. However, with a 2000, we'll get a little more of a pop, a little more of a bling. So in most cases, this is a 3-step process. Typically, you would start somewhere in the 400, 1200, 2000 range, or 600, 1200, 2000. In a more severe case like this, we'll start with 240 or 320, 400 or 600, 1200, and then 2000. A little bit of water, and again, this is our final sanding step. Very good. So you notice we also stop the sander on the lens, and that helps to prevent kind of making a mess. Alright, so clean this up. We want to dry it really well. Make sure the edges are nice and dry. There's not water kind of touching the edges of the headlight. And now that we have completed our sanding, we are ready to move on to our coating process. We're going to take a couple of lint-free towels, or 1 lint-free towel, depending on what you're using. We're going to take some alcohol in a spray bottle, and we're going to spray the surface down. We're going to thoroughly make sure that there's no finger grease, there's no other debris on the surface that might affect the coating when we go to apply it. So you'll notice a little preview here. Just kind of coat it. Now you won't have the alcohol included in your bottle for shipping reasons. We cannot include that with the coating or with the kits. So this is something you'll have to get locally. Isopropyl alcohol works just fine. Rubbing alcohol, the higher alcohol the content, the better. And we just want to make sure that all the edges are touched. We don't have any water, any grease present. So now we should be ready to go ahead and apply our OEM grade coating. At this point in time, we want to make sure we've got our masks and our gloves on in order to apply the coating without putting our health at risk. It's also important to remember, if you're doing a set of headlights or multiple cars, you can do them or do the steps that we just did simultaneously across both headlights or multiple cars, and therefore you'll be more efficient in your work rather than just doing one headlight, multiple steps, and then starting over on the other headlight. So you would do 320 or 240, 240, 400, 400, 1000, 1000, 2000, 2000, etc. And then so we're repeating the same steps on both sides. Okay, so the moment of truth has come. Again, we want to make sure that we shake up our bottle of Gclear. Make sure that it's thoroughly mixed up. We want to make sure we've got our applicator. And we want to make sure that we have our mask on. So we're going to start with that. And what you're going to see me do, I'm not going to talk during this portion because I will have the mask on, as I'm going to apply some coating along the edge here. And I'm going to go around the edges just real quickly. And then I'm going to apply a little bit more coating, and I'm going to go from bottom to top and just kind of swipe up like so. And the reason for that is we want to make sure we never miss the edges. That's the very easy thing to do. And then we're going to work across the face from top to bottom. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so at this point we've applied our coating. As you can see, it's kind of self-leveling into the surface. It'll take a few minutes for it to kind of like work its way into the headlight, but we're just going to let it sit for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and apply the curing light. Now, if for any reason at this point you notice that the application just didn't go as you liked, you can immediately use your isopropyl alcohol spray bottle, spray it down with alcohol, wipe it off, and start over. That's the beauty of it. But once we cure it, it's going to be difficult to get off. We'd have to start all those sanding process all over again. So we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll go ahead and start the curing process. At this point then, again, if I wanted to save my applicator, I'd put it in a plastic baggie, and I could use this other side for the next set. So at this point, the application is complete, and all we're going to do is bring our UV curing light directly in front of the headlight. Going to kind of adjust it so it's centered over the headlight. We'll maybe start it down here. And we're going to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 minutes. Primarily what we're looking to do is get a good surface cure, and then it's provided it's not raining outside or it's not snowing outside. At that point the vehicle could drive down the road and it'll just continue to harden over time. But we do want it to be surface cured before it leaves either the mobile setting or the garage setting. So now we'll go ahead and kind of move it up a little bit, kind of make sure we're getting the top of the headlight. This is fully adjustable, so you can adjust it up or down, kind of turn it at an angle. You do want to get it as close to the headlight as you possibly can. We'll leave it there for another minute or two. Now we're going to move it over to this side. Same thing, up high. So if you've done this process and during the application process you experience some streaking, you might ask why that occurs. So there's a couple of things that can factor into that. One is maybe using too much coating. If you use too much coating, then it tends to streak more. The other could be that the applicator is just too old or has been used too many times. The other thing to factor in is whether you have too much ambient or direct sunlight, which is causing the coating to kind of start to set up before it has a chance to settle. So it's important to kind of view those things. Definitely, it always helps to use the face of the applicator, the edge of the applicator, and be consistent with your motions. The least passes you can do, the better, and that will always give you a better finished result. Some people ask, how can I tell if I'm all the way down to the polycarbonate on that first sanding step? So the way you can tell is once you are sanding and you no longer see yellow stuff coming off the surface, that will indicate that all of the old oxidized coating is gone and now you're just sanding the polycarbonate. So now we've got our completed curing process done. Both headlights have been restored and we've got the original hard coat back on there again, designed to last for several years to come. And we've got a great looking finished product that is no doubt going to please our customers. And the entire process, once we've done from start to finish, might take us somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes depending on the severity and the situation and the type of car and the environment in which you're working. But the great thing is coming out with a great result like this and getting a long lasting result as well.